I have a curiosity question this morning. Some because I'm interested in knowing, and some is going to lead into my sermon a little bit. So, how many of us here today enjoy camping or hiking? That's a good portion of us. Did anybody notice whose hand did not go up? Well, no, mine should have been. I should have been done. I should have done this. There was somebody else in the crowd this morning whose hand did not go up, and it has created some animosity on certain occasions. One of my greatest pleasures, and she'll admit to it fully. Ask us sometime about her first camping trip. One of my, I'm getting the glare. One of my greatest pleasures in life is being able to get out into the great outdoors. Maybe glamping a little bit, which has helped us to ease some of those tensions. Because camping is a little harder now that I'm getting older. I mean, putting up a tent is really tough on the body, right? But regardless, there's something about falling asleep, listening to nothing but the breeze blowing through the leaves, the crickets chirping. Can you hear it? Right? Especially if you're laying next to the creek, hearing the babbling creek. While I was never a Boy Scout, I have done a fair amount of camping and hiking at different points in my life. Ironically enough, all of the churches that I have served have supported a scout trip of some kind. So I learned a lot about scouting, in particular about Boy Scouts, from those kids that I spent time with. And over the years, I've heard countless stories from the scouts about their adventures in the woods and at camp each year. And so as I was doing some research this past week, I stumbled across other stories of camping. I actually fell into a rabbit hole. I've sat there and read stories for quite some time of triumphs, a lot of mishaps, but mostly about triumphs of these scouts as they traveled throughout America and went to different camps. And the one thing that has been a common denominator in my life, as well as for these stories, is how the scouts prepared themselves to go to camp and for these adventures. One of the stories that I read this past week was about a group of scouts in New Mexico whose adventures included trekking to Baldy Mountain. Now, I had to look up Baldy Mountain because I had never heard of it before. It's a mountain, according to Wikipedia. It's the highest peak in the Cimarron Range, which is a sub-range, and I'm going to butcher this, but please bear with me, Sangre de Cristo Mountains of New Mexico. It's located in Colfax County, about 6 miles northeast of Eagle Nest. Does anybody know where those places are? Yeah, it's kind of what I did too. I had to look at the map and go, where? But this mountain rises abruptly with a total elevation of 12,441 feet. Now, if you're familiar with climbing and stuff like that, that's a significant height, right? It's not one like Mount Everest that we talked about a few weeks ago where you need oxygen, but it comes darn close. It lies on the northwestern border of the Boy Scouts of America Phil Mount Scout Ranch, which is why a lot of scouts travel. Now, I read one story in particular about a group who were trying to make it to the top of the mountain and ended up making a wrong turn. That's what I like to do. Going off in the wrong direction. And ultimately, their trek led them about 2 miles off the beaten path. So they had to come back 2 miles to get back to where they were supposed to be. And I couldn't help but wonder how much their preparation, both mental and physical and emotional, might have helped them. Because one of the things that was brought out in the story was how even though they went nearly 2 miles out of the way, they still managed to make their goal within that day. And if you're familiar with hiking and camping, a 2-mile trek out of the way is a long way out of the way, right? It takes a while, but they still did it. Now, from what I've read, many of these scouts spending a week in nature is a treasure to them, and they really put their hearts into it. I read countless stories of how the scouts would spend months planning and saving and training for their experiences. They had to make real sacrifices to be able to participate. And what they end up with is a true mountaintop experience. Has anybody had a mountaintop experience or something they would consider to be a mountaintop experience? Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay. Well, I began to wonder how many of us have ever experienced something to this extent in our lives. I mean, was there ever a time when you had to sacrifice time, energy, and money preparing to go on a special trip? Yes? No? Okay, I see some heads bobbing. Maybe you needed to get ready for something special that took into account all aspects of your life, and you had to give 100% of yourself to preparing. You see, I think when we consider what Jesus desires for us to be in this world, there is a serious sacrifice that needs to be made on our parts. If we consider his 12 closest friends, there was so much sacrifice that they made in order to be a part of his inner circle, to follow him. So much so that each of the disciples had been asked to leave everything that they knew behind, to go, just so that they could prove their determination in following Christ. And that made me think about our sacrifices for our faith. I mean, there has to be a cost to our discipleship, right? Yes? No? Okay. You guys are killing me this morning, do you know that? I'm going to be exhausted at the end of this. But here's why I asked that question. I think if our discipleship doesn't cost us something, it becomes cheap. And it becomes lip service. We can say we have faith and that we follow, but if we're not actually showing it and giving up something of ourselves to show it, is it really faith? Let me put it this way. If we truly desire something in our lives, doesn't that often come with a cost? I mean, like the example of my little black and white TV last week from my childhood. I gave up a lot of things in order to get that, to buy it. And then when I had it, I sacrificed more of my life. It was something that I wanted so desperately that I was willing to give up everything. Now let that sink in for a moment. That was a physical possession that I was willing to give up everything for. If there is something that is truly worth having in our lives, we are going to need to make sacrifices in order to get there and to have it. And so I'm making that connection that if we are going to walk the talk, then we need to understand and know that it is going to come at a cost to us in one form or another. And what I've often found in my life, though, is that if I really wanted something, I'm willing to give up whatever it is that I need to give up in order to get it, right? But it's not just financial. Here's something else that I've learned, at least in the last few years. Not all sacrifices are financial, right? Jesus in this passage is asking us to consider what we are really willing to sacrifice in order to be prepared for when he returns. And his answer to those around him in this passage hinges on their, and by extension, our willingness to be ready, to not save up our treasures here on earth, but rather save up treasures in heaven. So what are some things that we think might be treasures in heaven? Seriously, what is it, some things that we think that might be treasures in heaven? Mission work. But it's not easy to answer, is it? It is not an easy question to answer. What will we use to describe what might be waiting for us in heaven when we finally get there? If we don't know what we're storing up, how can we even remotely desire to sacrifice to get it? It's a hard question to answer. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. If we don't know what we're working for, how can we even remotely ask anyone else to join us to help us? I mean, it's like starting a building project without a drawing of what you're going to try and build. Has anybody tried to build something without a drawing or an idea of what they were building first? I have. It was a major failure. But as hard as it might seem to us to imagine what our treasure might be, especially in our very physical world, the good news of this parable and Jesus' teachings for us over the last few weeks is that we don't necessarily need to know what our treasure will be. Because there's a place promised and set aside for us already there. What matters is that God has promised it, and it will therefore be waiting for us. You see, all of Jesus' teachings are giving us glimpses of how to walk the talk. Jesus continues those teachings for us today by giving us another example, another way of thinking of it, another metaphor of what it means to be working toward the kingdom of heaven. And in this parable, Jesus once again uses an example of something familiar to those around him, that of being prepared for the master to come home. Now, I admit, in our world today, the terminology of master and the associated term of slave are hard for us to hear. And they hold very negative connotations. But the thing is, for those who surrounded him that day, he was teaching this for the very first time, those words were likely given to people who were slaves. They likely would have known exactly what it meant to be a slave and serving another human being. So let me try and put this into perspective in terms that we might be able to associate with. So, what if the one waiting for the master is your average, everyday Joe who works for a major corporation? Can we associate with that? Each day he or she comes to work and goes home every night to their respective families. Each night they go to bed knowing that they'll get up the next morning to do the exact same thing again tomorrow. However, each day that they are at work, they are constantly aware that the owner of the company might just happen to show up and stand behind them for a few moments. Has anybody ever experienced that? It's really intimidating, right? So they diligently do their job, prepare their reports, or put together the furniture that they are assembling, or hold the door for the person who enters the building. No matter what their responsibility is for the company, they diligently do their job. Still with me? All right, good. Here's the thing. You are probably sitting there going, but Pastor, isn't that what everybody does already anyway? Right? At least that's what we hope people do. And I would ask you to consider, how often do you see people not doing what they're supposed to be doing at their desk in today's world? Those of us who might have it, I'm not pointing any fingers, I promise. But let's consider the after effects of COVID-19, right? There was a time when it was not a question that you would travel to work, put in your 8, 9, or 10 hours a day, and then go home, have dinner, relax with your family, wake up, and do it all over again, right? But when COVID-19 hit, it changed things. It changed the whole atmosphere of the work environment. Maybe things were already going in this direction, but it seemed to make things worse, exponentially. And it seems that since then, people get up, roll out of bed, wander down the hall to their makeshift office, their dining room table, maybe an office with a desk and a chair, but whatever it is, the worker might be using. They sit there for a few minutes, get up and go do something around the house, come back, wiggle their mouse for a few minutes to make sure that You look shocked. Tell me that's not what you think people are doing. I didn't say it was you. I said I wasn't pointing fingers. But they wiggle their mouse just to make sure that the computer is staying active. It becomes, and then go off and do something else. It becomes a routine, right? You find other things to continue to do at home. Did you know that there is software that you could, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this. Did you know that there is software that you can download onto your computer that makes it look like you're moving your mouse every few minutes? I'm not joking. I actually found software on the internet this week. That's a really good question, only because I read somewhere that that's what people are doing. Oh, I'm going to get myself in trouble now. I'm While that may not be an issue for some of us, to me, I think it's creating issues in the workforce, right? I mean, how many people actually do the job that they were hired to do anymore? It just seems to me that listening to the person who sits at our dining room table every day doing the job she was hired to do, there are plenty of people out there whose work ethic is far from doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'll take it. Say it again. Listen, if we as a society no longer look at our jobs as serious, how many people do you think take their faith seriously? I know that was a bit of an ouch moment for some of us, but I also think this is what Jesus wants for us to understand. Being prepared means just that, being prepared, always ready. And I would think that the scouts who go to climb Mount Baldy do not just put a few items in a bag and go. I would think that they might consider what they will need and then maybe put together a list of the things that they need to make sure that they do not leave anything behind. I know when I went glamping, even when we still go glamping as little as we do it, I have a list of the clothes that I anticipate needing. I have a list of the toiletries and the items that I need to make sure are in my suitcase or in my bag. I have a list of the food that we're planning on cooking and the items that we need in order to cook it. I try to make sure that I do not leave anything behind. And Jesus, in his infinite ability to put things into perspective, is saying this same exact thing here. We do not know when he will return. We only know that he has promised to return. And so because we do not know, then then we should be preparing ourselves daily as if today, this moment, might be the time that he walks through our door. We should be acting as if our faith were the most important thing to us each day. We should be doing the things that he taught us to do throughout his life. Not waiting to try and get it all accomplished at the last minute, or worse yet, putting off till tomorrow because it's another day to get it done. This all boils down to preparing for Christ by giving with generosity, serving with enthusiasm, praying with passion, forgiving without hesitation, and welcoming one another just as Christ has welcomed each of us. We do not know the hour in which he will bring the whole of human history to its conclusion, but we are challenged to live in such a way that we are ready for it. The truth is, we do not know what is coming down the path, but we also do not achieve the abundant life that Christ desires for us by playing it safe. We have to venture out, take some chances if we are going to experience growth in Christian faith and understanding. And so I ask you, what chances can we take together so that we are always prepared, have a little bit of treasure stored up in heaven for us, because we are not just idly sitting there wiggling our mouse every so often to make it look like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. What can we be doing together? Amen.